Hi everybody, it's Adam Duff from LUCIDPIXUL, blah, 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 blah. I have an exciting topic for you today. And it's one it's exciting, but it can be considered a little bit controversial. And that's the topic of photobashing. And I would include in parentheses 3D. 3D in the context of 2D concept art, when it's used to help speed up the process. And the answer I want to explore, an answer to the best of my own ability, is the question of, is it art? Is photobashing art? Is using 3D in your 2D images, in your 2D concept art, actually considered art? Or is it considered cheating? All right? Now, it's funny that this keeps coming up because I'm 40 now, so I've been in the industry now for a couple of decades, and I've started to see certain trends, and I'm starting to see certain trends recur, but in different context. And photobashing is a relatively new subject. So if you're somebody who's in their 20s or you're fresh out of school and you're looking at a lot of the concept art and stuff like that's out there, you might not be aware of where this whole world of photo and 3D and bashing and all this kind of stuff came from and why people use it. And furthermore, you might not have the background and the knowledge and the education to know where that limit is drawn. When is it still considered concept art, and when is it still considered skilled art, and when does it cross that line to becoming something else? Something that might be considered cheating or might be just, a misuse of a certain technique. So to give you a little bit of a background, I want to give you a little bit it's not going to be a big art history lesson or anything like that, but I want to give you a little bit of background on where this type of thought process, where these types of opinions come from, all right? Through the course of history. I'm not just talking about photobashing, I'm talking about way in the past. So if you look over here, I'm going to open up Bridge. Oops, a daisy, not Photoshop, Bridge, okay? And if we look here, I have a folder. Get out of here. All right. If you look at, I have a folder set up here, which is an example of photography used in art. In fine art, contemporary art, abstract art, whichever type of art you feel like using, okay? Now these are paintings or images that were, done over the course of the 20th century or even before, all right? Or at least since photography. It couldn't have been before. We didn't have photographs back then, right? So you can see a couple of different little examples, if I can get my computer to behave the way I want it to, of collages, different types of photography used in art. Now, the reason I'm showing this to you is not to belittle concept art or poke fun at the whole subject, but it's to demonstrate something very significant. And that's the fact that I come originally from the fine arts background. I studied fine arts and cartoon animation before I got into concept art. In the world of fine art, when you walk into a gallery, this type of stuff is completely acceptable. It's completely normal. People, it's very celebrated. It's very expected. It's very normal to walk into a gallery and see people use all kinds of different mixed media. People using material from nature, branches and leaves, using photographs, using resin, using all different types of things. I've even seen people use human feces for paintings. When the guy asked me, "What do you think?" I said, "It loooks like shit." Okay? To put it quite bluntly, right? And it did. It looked like shit, and it was shit. So there you have it. So, but you can see here now. Is it my particular bag? Is it my thing? No, not particularly. But you can see how photography and traditional art is being mixed here, and totally normal. Okay. Some people are more skilled than others. Some people take it a little bit further. Some people don't. Some people mix a little bit. You have a mix of photography and sketching on top of it. And these are just random things I found online. Okay, this isn't anything in any particular celebrated artist as far as I know, because this isn't the type of art that I generally check out myself. But I am aware of its existence, right? Now, are these artists? If you walked into a fine art gallery, somebody having a vernissage or doing some kind of an exhibit, and you walked in and you saw this kind of stuff, would you look at it and go, "That's cheating. That's not real art"? No, you might like it, you might not like it, but you're not going to walk in and call them a cheat. You're just going to say, "Well, no, I like it or I don't. It's my taste or it's not." All right? Now let's take it a little bit further, and let's actually look at some real fine art here. So I'm going to go back and we're going to look at... actually, before we do that, let's look at some other examples of shortcuts used in art in the past Today we have, for instance, the use of 3D or photobashing to help speed up the process of producing certain types of art, right? We can use it as a background template. We can use it as a way of mixing colors quickly to, you know, save us the trouble of trying to figure out a palette that harmonizes nicely together, that kind of idea, right? But if we look in traditional animation, when I studied animation back, you know, 20 years or so ago, okay, I studied classical film animation. So what we did have to learn and use were the Oxbury cameras. And this is the junior Oxbury, I think. There's a junior that has one hydraulic pipe, and there was a senior that had two. And you'd have to learn how to film this bad boy in pitch blackness. It was kind of fun, okay? And, you know, getting the film reel in there and taking shots and everything. But the reason I'm showing you this is because this... you could use an Oxbury camera or a Bolex or whichever one you were using, if you were doing stop motion or something like that, to shoot one frame at a time. So you'd have all your images, your drawings, your 24 images per second or 12 images per second if you're doubling up your frames or whatever, and you'd shoot each frame. You'd load up the next one, load up the next one, and you do them one at a time. But this device could also be used to reverse the image and actually project an image through a sheet of paper that you could trace. And that was a technique called rotoscopy, okay? And you can see here, you can see a little example on the screen of how the line is being drawn over the original line drawing. Here's another example. This is actually more, this isn't so much rotoscopy as it is referencing, just referencing the animation, although it might be slightly rotoscoped as well. Don Bluth. You might be familiar with Don Bluth if you've seen any kind of, if you're familiar with animation, if you played Dragon's Lair or Space Ace, the video games, if you've seen Anastasia or Nim's Island, I think it was called. He's done tons of films, and a former Disney artist that ended up starting his own studio, okay? The reason I'm showing Anastasia and several of his films is because Don Bluth, you could very quickly, easily recognize that he used a lot of rotoscopy in his work. How did I personally feel about it? I didn't look at it and go, he cheated. I wasn't a big fan of rotoscopy very often because it created a too realistic result. It was like you could tell when it was rotoscopied. It was missing a little bit of that traditional animation flair to it, but it was cool. You know, gets the job done type of idea. Didn't think anything of it. And this is giving you a little example of projecting, backlighting something for the sake of over a photograph to trace it. Okay, if you look at people before computers existed as well, very commonly people who would do traditional painting would use a projector and project a photograph onto a canvas and sketch to get a quick outline of a figure. Totally acceptable, totally normal techniques. Okay, confided the artist admitted to using those techniques. If a person, one thing you don't want to do is do it and then say, oh, I did that all from my head, when you didn't. And a trained eye can see that, can see when something's been traced and something hasn't been traced. It's pretty obvious, okay? Especially when you're working in traditional painting for that matter. So it was a completely normal and accepted technique. As long as that technique was transparent, as long as the artist was transparent about that technique and didn't pretend to be doing something that they weren't. Because if any but trained artists came in and caught their bluff, it's not so much the technique that they used that pissed people off and could mess with their reputation, but it's the fact that they were calling it something it wasn't. They were claiming something it wasn't. It was the lie that pissed people off. And when it comes to things like photobashing, there's a certain line you have to be careful with as well. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of examples of some really skilled, beautiful concept art using photobashing. Okay, here we can see some work here. I'm not exactly sure where this is from. I'm not sure which game. But you can see, if you look closely, you can see that a lot of these areas aren't even painted over. It's just kind of a collage. He's got this factory warehouse, and there's a couple of there's a little bit of painting over and stuff like that. You can see that things have pretty much been slapped together. Does it create a nice looking image? Yeah, I think this looks like a nice image. Do I look at it and think to myself, look at that artist's unique brushstroke and unique skill? No, because that's not what I'm here to look for. That's not what photobashing does for me. I don't look at a painting like this and say, look at the skilled brushstrokes and, you know, the beautiful use of, you know, the texture, the hand-painted textures and all of these different things. I'm not marveling at this artist's incredible skill with perspective, because the artist didn't need any skill and perspective to be able to paint this. None whatsoever. They were just basically, you just have to line up your perspective, which is pretty easy to do, right? You could draw a perspective grid over it, stick your character in there, stick your different things in there. A little bit of lighting, you know, if you look in this area around here, a little bit of use of lighting around here and that kind of stuff. Darkening out certain areas, adding a bit of ambient fog around here. But this painting could easily be done in an hour because it's only partially a painting. It's photobashing, and that is what this is. When I did a Google search for photobashing, I found this. So whoever posted it with, you know, some of the meta tags photobashing on it, because they knew it was photobashing and they're not trying to hide it. Anybody who spends more than 5 seconds looking at it can see that this is photobashing. Is it nice? Is it a valuable piece of artwork for a studio to use? Absolutely, because a studio can use this kind of stuff to help building their set, right? Or building their video game 3D environment, because they have a good reference there, right? There's enough information, there's a good enough idea of lighting and ambience that the 3D guys can start working with it, okay? And we could look at a couple of other examples here, okay? Again, a lot of photobashing. If you look at the rocks, you can even look at the character over here. That's definitely been a cut and paste image as well. A little bit of painting over a tree. You can see how this has been cut and paste on top. This is pretty much 99% photobashing with a little bit of lighting, of multiply layer. Like, you can see the technique. If you know, spend a couple of weeks learning Photoshop and you'll know how this is done. Does it mean that you can do it just as well first shot? No, because I can look at this and see that the artist that put this together has a good understanding of light, has a good understanding of composition, has a good understanding of atmospheric depth, has a good understanding of ambiance, has a good understanding of all of these different things, has painted, but has just slapped this together quickly to skip certain time-consuming steps. So if somebody who has absolutely no idea to draw and hasn't studied any of these principles tries to do the same thing, you'll be rudely surprised at the fact that you can't pull it off. All right? Same thing here. Pretty much the same idea. A little bit blurrier, a little muddier, a little less work put into this one, but you know, the job gets the job done. You can see a very decrepit environment. This is a little sharper. But again, same principle, right? You know, a couple of hand-painted vibes and a couple of flowers over here. Maybe came in with a bit of a flower brush to create a little bit of an overlap to give some overgrowth to the scene. Some textures painted over this to make it feel a little bit more rusty. The rain, you know, there's actual rain brushes. You could just go like that and it slaps in all the rain. This isn't complicated. This isn't tough stuff. Right, before I come to my final words, my final thoughts on the whole subject of photobashing and that kind of thing, I want to bring you back a little bit to the late 19th, early 20th century, when artists like this guy over here, like Bouguereau, were very popular when they were in their prime producing their art. Now, Bouguereau, by today's standards, you might already be very, very familiar with his work, a famous French painter. Bouguereau is known by today's standards as one of the greatest realist painters of all time. Realist meaning he captured realism. He tried to capture real life. And if you've ever had the pleasure of seeing this guy's paintings in real life, they're probably the most spectacular thing you're ever going to see. I remember my mother took me to see an exhibit back when I was in my teens at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, and they had a big Bouguereau exhibit at the time. And it knocked me off my feet when I saw this work for the first time. Larger than life, 8-10 foot canvases, 20 feet across, and so realistic and believable that that you didn't only feel like you were looking at something that was realistic. You felt like you were looking at somebody who was alive. You could feel the life energy in his paintings. They were that good. They could literally walk right off the page. I could look at these paintings, these figures, and feel like they really are alive. I'm not just looking at a realistic photograph. However, what you might not know is around the same time, around that, you know, mid-late 19th to early 20th century, other artists were also emerging and in their prime as well. Artists like, for instance, Renoir or Degas or Monet, okay? Who, if you know a little bit about art or art history, you'll know that they were known as being some of the greatest Impressionists of all time, okay? Also French artists as well. And because these two worlds were doing they were at a bit of a crossroads at the time, same time frame, okay? Because they were at a bit of a crossroads, people were turning their noses up I don't know who exactly, but a lot of people, a lot of these artists, these impressionists and these collectors of impressionist art would look at artists like Bouguereau, and Bouguereau was right in the crosshairs of a lot of this scrutiny, would look at his artwork and say, if it's something you can see in real life, then it's not art. Because art is your impression, it's the artist's impression of what real life is. It's capturing feeling, it's capturing personal, it's capturing mood, it's capturing all of these things. But if it's just something, if I can, walk outside and see somebody like that sitting on the corner of a fence, well, then I don't call it art, because you're just copying life. It's almost like plagiarizing real life. It's kind of the attitude they had back then. Now, of course, we don't have that attitude anymore. When you look at this painting, it's masterful and beautiful. But Bouguereau had to deal with a lot of scrutiny for his particular style of work. Fast forward to when I first started my career, and I originally had studied fine arts and classical animation, and computer 3D started to come out. The early birth of 3D. And my personal, very strong opinion of it, and I feel justified in saying this, was it wasn't real art either. It was a technical achievement. It was not an artistic achievement. Some of the early animations that I saw, I remember one in particular, was these three silver kind of glass or metallic kind of chrome Tyrannosaurus Rexes that were running across a plane, animated by hand, and the reflection and everything was done in 3D, and everybody was like, "Whoa, that's so cool," right? Because nobody ever seen anything like that. I looked at it from an animator's perspective and went, it's horrible, it's awful, it's cold. The tempo of the dinosaurs running together was very, metronome-like, and it was very cold, and the whole look of it was very empty and shallow. I hated it, and I still do. And do I think it was an artistic achievement back then? Not at all. I think it was a technical achievement. It wasn't an artistic achievement until artists took the helm. Until artists started to use this 3D, which was not an easy job back in the time when I first started working with 3D. 3D was not designed for artists. It was designed for programmers. It was a real pain in the ass to learn. It's completely, you're lucky nowadays if you didn't experience that. But when artists started to take over the helm, some of these award-winning films started to come out. I remember one about this guy who's a stained glass knight who kind of broke out of the glass. When I saw stuff like that, that was a game changer, because now artists were taking over the tool and creating art with it. People who understood creative thought and color and ambiance and real character animation and composition and value and texture and all these beautiful things that make for a beautiful work of art. It was the artist that made the art, not the tool. And the same thing applies to photography and photobashing, or using 3D templates in a 2D image. You cannot fake art, and a lot of newer, younger artists don't realize this. A lot of younger artists look at art that's been photobashed and go, "Oh, well, that seems easy enough. I just have to take some photographs, slap them together, and I'm good to go." No. And when you see artists do that, they fail at it miserably every single time. You look at it and go, "No, it looks like shit. It looks like you took a bunch of photographs and you slapped them together without any understanding of perspective or value or depth or lighting or posing or any of those things. It's just crap. It's just slapped together photographs, and none of it makes any sense." You cannot use a tool to replace your need to understand the fundamentals. Through the course of history, no matter what has ever been produced artistically, the fundamentals always had to be there. But once you learn the fundamentals, once you master the fundamentals, you are empowered with the ability to take on any task using any type of technology, and give yourself enough time to familiar yourself with the tools, and you will be able to produce beautiful art. And I've seen it time and time again. When the fundamentals are there, that will carry you through anything. It doesn't matter which tool. The tool is just a matter of choice at this point. I could be working in 3D right now. I know it. I learned it. But I prefer 2D. It's my medium. Digital painting. My mother is a fine artist who likes oils. I know other artists that love acrylics. I know some artists that love watercolors. I love some artists that like whittling things out of wood, or making sculptures out of clay or beeswax or whatever. That's totally their call. But because they have a strong sense of the fundamentals, they're good to go. But there's one disclaimer I'm going to mention here. There's something very important to mention before we close up for today. And that is, when do you cross the line? Because that's the big one. And there is a line that you can cross. And this was a line that was crossed in one of the Facebook posts that I saw this week by somebody, referencing somebody. I'm not a drama guy, so I'm not going to bring up names or anything. I can't remember anyways. But where somebody had essentially taken a photograph and just edited put some filters on it, spent some 5 minutes worth of filters on it and called it a piece of concept art, and was hailed and praised for being a gifted concept artist for this particular piece of artwork. When the person who posted this was furious because they were saying, this isn't art, this is just taking a photograph, applying a few filters and calling it concept art. And that's what pissed off this person who made the post. And you know what? It pissed me off too. Because it's not concept art. The mistake, I feel, was not that the artist sucked. It wasn't that the artist wasn't any good. It wasn't that the artist was trying to hide their lack of artistic skill, because there's a very good chance that that artist has got tons of awesome paintings that they've done by hand. The mistake was in calling it concept art. It was in crossing the line with the naming conventions of their work. It was claiming something that it wasn't. It was, in essence, I wouldn't call it a lie because it's too obvious. If it was a lie, it was a very poor lie. But it was presented to the wrong crowd. Remember, different types of artwork require you to master certain types of skill. If you're going to take a photograph and edit a photograph, don't call it concept art. Call it photography. But in doing so, understand that you are stepping into a new pair of shoes. You're stepping into a different realm, the realm of photography. So if you're going to take a photograph and edit a photograph and just apply a few filters, maybe a few little loose brush strokes on top of it, don't call it a piece of concept art. Call it photography, but then know that when you present that to the photography crowd, they might look at it and they'll have their own share of scrutiny to throw at you. They might call it a masterpiece because you're a master photographer who did some wonderful photo editing work in Photoshop. Or they might say it's very amateur photography with some cheap, very transparent use of filters, and you're not impressing anybody. By calling it concept art, you're calling it something it's not. And that people will call you out for it, and it'll piss people off, and that can mess with your reputation. So be careful with that. I'm sure the artist who did that wasn't their intention to lie to anybody, but they did cross that line. They didn't consider what that art was for. Same thing applies to if you're doing a photo bashing painting. Don't do a photo bashed painting and do a little filter over it and add a couple of brush strokes and say I painted it from scratch. You didn't paint it from scratch. It didn't require you to know any perspective, or at least to draw it, which would have taken you weeks or months to do. Okay, it didn't require you to mix any different types of colors because all the colors already existed in the photographs. It didn't require you to do 2/3 or 4/5 of the work that you need to do if you did it traditionally. Okay, call it what it is. Call it photo bashing. Those beautiful pieces of artwork that I posted for you, these ones over here. Okay, that beautiful artwork is photo bashing. It's nicely done. But he calls it photo bashing. I found it first shot when I looked up photo bashing on Google. That's how you present yourself. And as such, when I look at it, I appreciate it for what it is. And I don't get pissed off for the person claiming it to be something it's not. All right? And remember, the fundamental thing is learn your fundamentals first. Because if you don't learn your fundamentals, you can do anything with anything and it'll always suck. You got to learn the fundamentals, whether you learn it in a traditional school, whether you learn it in a mentorship, or whether you learn it on your own. It doesn't matter, but you got to learn it. All right? So hopefully that kind of clears the air for some of you out there that are kind of torn with the whole subject and which way to pursue your own career. And with that said, of course, I have my online mentorship, which I have openings for right now. If you're interested, I have my private online mentorship where I teach all of those cool fundamentals. Every single one, and then some that I haven't even mentioned. So you can come and check that out for yourself. All the information is in the description below. You can just go and check it out for yourself. Click on the links. Remember as well that I have the Brush Sauce Theater with Tyler Edlin. He's also got his own YouTube channel, and he's also awesome as well. So you can go and check that out. We have our art competitions, our Brush Sauce Theater art competitions. You can come and check out for yourself. Free critiques, professional critique for your artwork, and lots of exposure as well. So it's definitely a win-win situation. And with that said, that's it. So don't forget to like and comment. If there's anything that I missed in today's talk or anything you'd like me to talk about in the future, let me know in the comments below. And happy painting. Take care.